Signs of solving crimes. The next stage. This is the case of the threatening note. So, a note has been received with a demand to leave. One of our staff members has received it. It's obvious that it was written by another staff member, and so what we've done is we've had a search of the school, we've searched all of the desks in the school, and we've revealed a selection of different brands of pen that could have been used to write the note, because all the same colour, all the same thickness, all the same type. A search of the desks of all of the staff members has revealed that there is a selection of common brands of pen that could have been used to write the note. That means they're all the same colour, the same thickness, the same type. And they were found on the desks of several staff members. So all we can do from this study is basically reveal what brand of pen was used. In order to figure out what brand of pen was used, we're going to use a method called chromatography. Now this is used to separate out unique substances based on their solubility. So every pen that you have from a different brand, they all have their own unique mixture or recipe of inks that they put together in order to get that color ink. Even black has a multitude of colors mixed in together to get each type of black. And that mixture, the recipe, is unique for the manufacturer. So we're going to be using chromatography to separate out the inks in those mixtures using their properties of solubility, and then we're going to be measuring each one of those different ink colors that are within the mixture to see if we can then match it up to the perpetrator's notes. Now it's really important in this experiment that you need to follow the method very, very carefully. If you don't, the data will actually be very different. It won't be reliable. It will have a high degree of variation, and because of that we won't be able to identify or match it to the perpetrator note. So, step 1, this is what you do. You have a selection of little test tubes here, and they need to be set up and labelled in this order. A, M and W. This stands for acetone in the first two, methylated spirits in the second two, and distilled water in the last two. Make sure that they're in the correct order because you need to have the solvents in the correct order. Just make sure basically that you've put them in alphabetical order. Secondly, you need to match up these solvents like this and get ready to actually put them into your test tubes so that you've got them in the correct order. Alright, so here's it comes down to it. Each one of those solvents you need to put them into the test tubes. But before you do that, if it hasn't already been done so, you need to mark the level that you're going to be starting your chromatography prac at. Now this is 1 centimeter up or 10 millimeters from the bottom, and it has to be the same across all of the test tubes. So if it hasn't been done already, you need to mark 10 millimeters up from the bottom on every test tube in your rack. Next, remember how you had those solvents lined up in order? Well, now you need to put them in your test tubes. In the first two test tubes it's acetone, and when you pour it in you need to make sure that you fill it up to the level that you marked. Now you would have learned in previous years how to actually measure when you have a meniscus. This is this curvy little bit on the top of the liquid here, that's a meniscus. The rule of thumb is that you measure from the bottom of the curve, the bottom of the meniscus. That is where our line has to be. You don't measure from the top, you measure from the bottom. Everyone has to do it exactly the same way, otherwise you have error. So put in the first two lots of acetone up to that level, then the metho, and then lastly the water. Now if you've done it correctly and they're all exactly the same height, you should be able to see it. You might notice here, these two here are definitely not the same height, so they're going to have error in there if I don't go back and fix that. But the reason we have it at that 10 mil height is that we're going to be putting the inks to test up here on this line. You must have the solvent down below that line, because if you drop the ink down into here, it will simply dissolve into that solution and you won't have any test at all. We want the solution, the solvent, sorry, to be sucked up the chromatography paper and take the ink with it. The other thing is, this is their starting line. Okay, so if you have different levels of solvent here, this one here is going to make it up to the line before this one here would make it up to the line. That's why you must have them exactly the same height. The next thing you have to do is label your strips. Now this is really important. We have 2 layers here that you're going to be labeling. First of all, you have the letter that indicates the type of solvent that you use. That's the first line. The second line tells me what pen you used, because every group will be testing a different pen. So in this case, I'm actually testing the unknown letters pen. So I've put X there, but you will have your own little pen identifier that you need to put there. So you're going to test your pen twice in the acetone, twice in the metho, and twice in the water. And once you've set them all out, this is what we should see before you continue any further. Next is that you have to actually add in the ink that you're going to be testing from your test pen. Now this is really important. You need to have an equal amount of test ink on each of the strips of paper, otherwise it's a little bit hard to compare them. Okay, because if you have a small amount of ink on one paper and a huge amount of ink on another, they're not going to look exactly the same, and it's going to be harder to figure out which one matches. So in order to keep our inks the same, we've got this little template here that we made up. And the rule of thumb is this: you colour in using the template, see how that it's put over the starting line that is on your piece of paper, and you only colour over it with your pen once. So I don't want to see people going over and over and over and over it. That's putting extra ink on the paper. No, the rule is you only go over the area once to completely fill it in. Now this is what it should look like when you've filled it in. Notice how I missed a tiny little bit there. That's okay. Better to miss a tiny little bit than go over it again and end up with far too much ink on there. Okay, so make sure you just colour in your piece of ink there on the line. And do that to all of your pieces of paper. They should look pretty much exactly the same like that when you're finished. Next step is wait. Everyone needs to start at the same time. That's because we're going to be running this chromatography experiment for exactly the same time and stopping them together. Really important. If you don't stop them together, then they're all going to look differently. One of the things we're going to be measuring is how far each one of the colors has traveled. But the longer it's in the solution, the further it will travel. So if we don't stop them all at the same time, we're not going to be able to compare them. It won't be valid data. So you need to wait at this point, make sure every group is up to this, and then when you're instructed in your pair, one person will hold these 3 in the test tubes, but not in the solvent yet, just in the top. The other person will hold these 3 in the test tubes at the top, and then when they say go, you're going to gently drop them into the solvents below so that they're each in their correct test tube. And then you're going to wait for the required amount of time, and when the time is up, you have to pull all 6 of them out at the same time and place them down on some dry paper to dry so that we can then analyze them further.